just like kind of break this down, and then I'll just kind of build it back up from the top. So this is, yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Whoop. Okay, so you all ready? Want me to start?
Yep, recording.
Okay, so basically, if you have a long tube or a long tail or whatever that you want to control with like a lot of smoothness and a lot of flexibility, but you don't want to have a billion joints, what you can do is under this geometry, you can make a complex joint chain. So you can make a joint chain with like, as many joints as you want. The more the merrier. And then what you want to do is just hide your geometry for now and put this on a layer called complex chain. Just to remember, this is the joint chain that you're not going to control in the end. This is just going to drive your rig. And to sort of set that up, we want to make an IK spline handle. I already have one set up in this scene. But if you want to do that, you just go to the skeleton, create IK spline handle, go into the settings, make sure that auto create curve and root on curve are on. Almost none of this other stuff actually matters. It's all just to taste how many spans you use, what kind of twist you use. And after you do that, just make a NURB controller or a null or another joint that you can use as a master to control the entire rig as a whole, and just reserve that off to the side and call it master, just so you know what it is. So now that you have your IK spline tool in there, you should notice if you grab a point on that and you wiggle it around, it should do that. It's giving you a smooth, even deformation of your joint chain, which is what we want. And that's why we have so many joints. And that's why we want to control it with an IK spline, is just to get it really smooth. So now that behavior is looking correct, we want to make another simpler chain over top of this, just directly on top of it, so that we can control this chain with a simpler chain and not have to worry about keyframing 50 joints. So I'm just going to set this to reference so I can't actually touch it, or actually to transparent. And I have a simple chain built up. This one's only 4 chains. And you don't have to get it right on, but it's just convenient if you do. So I literally snapped the beginning and the end joints to the beginning and the end joints of my complex chain. So now that he's there, what we're going to do is we're going to skin bind the curve that drives the IK spline to this simple chain, so that the complex chain is being driven by the spline and the spline is being driven by the simple chain. So I'm just going to make the complex chain invisible. And in my outliner, I'm just going to find the curve that's at the center of the IK spline. And I'm going to select the root, shift select the root of the simple chain, go to skin, bind skin. Pretty much default settings for this will work. Just got to make sure that you don't put in max influences that are more than the number of joints you have. Like I have 4 joints. I just did 2 because no point on this curve is going to be close enough to 3 of these joints to inherit influence from them. If you have it too high, it can have some very strange results. And then you just hit apply, so that when we start to bend this, it's taking the curve with it. And then if we turn back on visibility for our complex chain, you can see that we're getting a really nice, even control of our complex chain with our simple chain. Now, the last things we have to do are make sure that this can be moved as a whole and that it's scalable and that it can rotate scale up and down, translate without breaking the rig. And then we have to actually bind geometry to it. So right now, if I were to select this simple chain and scale it, you'll notice it's not taking the complex chain with it. In fact, only its root joint is scaling, which is not behavior we want. We want to be able to shrink and grow this. All you really have to do in that case, and this is where our master control object comes in. And like I said, it can be a null, it can be a NURB, it can be a piece of geometry, it can be literally anything that can accept children objects in a hierarchy. I like to use NURBS curves so I can just turn them on and off in visibility easily. Just take the 2 joint chains and just drag them under the master so that they're parented to it. Leave the curve and the IK handle outside because they're already accepting instructions from other hierarchies. So if we double parent them, it'll be weird. And now we can scale it and rotate it very evenly. If you want, say if this was a tail on an animal, this master doesn't have to be a null. It can be the pelvis joint in that hierarchy. Just take the top of your tail and parent it to your pelvis joint the same way with these 2 chains, and that'll work just fine. Or like if this was, say, a lamp and this was an electrical cord, you could just make this master control object the base of the lamp, the actual geometry. It'll work just fine. So now we have scalable, and the simple chain is driving the complex chain in the desired way. All that's left is to paint in the actual surface geometry. And so I'll just turn the visibility of that guy on. That's him. And we want him to be weight painted to the complex chain because that's the whole idea, is to get as many joints as possible to get a nice, smooth, even paint weights with minimal effort. So I'm going to select this guy, turn off his visibility, turn off the visibility of the simple chain, shift select the complex chain so that I have the geo and the complex chain shift selected. Then just go to skin, bind skin, pretty much default settings, except here I can step up the max influences because I have a lot more joints. Hit apply. Well, in my file, I got an error because it was already weight painted. And that just for this tutorial, I forgot to unweight paint it. But that would work. So now, if I turn on geometry and then I turn on simple chain and I start moving this around, I'm going to get a nice even wiggle from this guy. And that's pretty much it. You can do some fancy stuff later to like make a cluster deformer so that you can drive the animation with the end of the handle instead of the joints. But honestly, to me, that's a pain in the ass. You could also go a little bit further and on the simple chain, make a regular IK so that you can sort of move it as if you were animating a human leg and this was a knee. Again, just to taste whatever you're comfortable with. I usually this simple version of the rig just does the trick for me. And that's it. Brody, you want me to address any specific questions, or did that cover everything for you?
I think that's good. That was like that's the whole process.
All right.
I guess the other thing is if I was to like duplicate that and do like 2 tails, and I wanted to do a master just for those both, would I just like drag
yeah,
both of those underneath one NURB curve?
Yeah, that would be just fine. If you were to duplicate this, I've actually never tried that, but I think you'd have to duplicate special, and you'd have to make sure it duplicated with the input graph, or it would just make a bunch of useless joint chains. Yeah, that should have worked. Nope. Okay, yeah. Duplicating this seems to be a problem. You probably would have to make a file of it and then import another version of it if you wanted to duplicate it without just remaking it.
Okay.
It's just one of those annoying fucking things. Unless you can figure out all this stuff, there might be some kind of setting in duplicate special that would let you literally duplicate the whole hierarchy with all the relationships intact. But that might just be figuring that out might just be harder than just taking care of it and remaking it.
Okay.
All right, dude.
All right, that's about it. Let me stop the recording. Thank you so much for doing that, man. I really, really appreciate that.